welcome. You're listening to episode number 47 of the podcast At the Crossroads of the Safe Network, right here at safecrossroads.net. I'm your host, John Ferguson, the Simpleton of Project Safe, because not everybody can be a geek. Oh, goodness knows I missed that train way too long ago to catch up. But I've got some talents. I parlayed my ignorance and inability to really get down to the metal on these things, to ask the right questions, to probe and gain understandings and draw understandings out of those who might otherwise not be able to rise to the level of easy description. So we have fun. We have fun exploring the safe network technology. What is a safe network? For those that don't know, probably the easiest way to sum it up is it is the world's first autonomous information or data storage and communication network. It's, say, it is the network that it is in the process of being put there. It's not finished. It's not autonomous yet, but it shall be. That's the whole point. Secure access for everyone, SAFE, with privacy, security, and freedom. That tells a lot of the tale right there. In order for something to be for everyone, anyone has to be able to access it and use it. And since it is made up of people voluntarily contributing resources to the network and being rewarded for doing so, it's not discriminatory as long as behavior in running the software is correct. Anyway, that's a big tale. And if you want to find out about it, even if you know quite a bit about the Safe Network and haven't been to safenetwork.tech, I highly recommend it. It's a great website for kind of peeling it apart according to your own needs. It has multiple facets that you can get your own questions answered and unfolds the different parts and see how they work together. Also from there, you can find other places like the Safe Network Community Forum, incredible group, and the Developer Forum is also excellent and linked there. Many other things you'll find, including links to MaidSafe, the company, which has been fostering the Safe Network's creation along for quite a long time, over 13 years. I'm happy to say that MaidSafe is a sponsor of this podcast, helped make it possible, so cheers. I'd be doing it anyway, and I have been doing it for a long time. Incredible group. I'm really happy because I understand the impact that actually the developments are already having, but what they will have when they all come together. Many things have come forward. All right. Well, let's roll on into the body of what we're here to talk about today. We get some help from a couple of developers in MaidSafe, two of the members of the JavaScript portion of the front-end team. I think there are 3 or 4 of them now. We got 2. Not bad. And for those who don't know what the front end is, that's the area where users interface the network, or where application developers develop interfaces that users can use to exploit the network. And these guys have done some great work in developing sample applications that show some of the features and capabilities of the network, and open it up for others to continue that creation. Anyway, we have Gabriel Viganotti, who is out of Argentina, and we have Josh Wilson, who is a Scot, but he's in Spain. I don't know. I didn't ask him about that. But anyway, MaidSafe has a very active team all over the world, as well as there in Ayr, Scotland. What we discuss here is really fascinating. Essentially, we really dig down on Resource Description Framework, RDF. Now, this was new to me, but it's not new in the world. And it's taken a bit to start to wrap my wits around it. And actually, I think many people in tech have not really had a great appreciation of it. But it is now coming into its own with some really, really neat applications. And we talk about that, and we talk about things that come from that, which like linked data. And to drop a name, Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the World Wide Web, or the father of the World Wide Web, has a project called SOLID, which stands for Socially Linked Data, which kind of falls under the category of RDF. And he's got a really neat project there to return control of data to users, because having been the father of the World Wide Web, he is a little bit concerned about where his child has proceeded to grow and is looking for an alternative. So we talk about that. We talk about a number of other things in this, both separate from and how they interact with the SAFE network. I think we've made it very available to most anybody, and also useful to people who are in the know. So I hope you will find it useful. Oh, I did want to mention one thing. Not too long ago, I did an episode on Technology and Choice, my other podcast, episode number 37, called What is the Semantic Web, with Jonas Smedgaard. And in that episode, we go into some of the implications of what we talk about in this episode. It's kind of backwards. We talk about the semantic web and linking data together and some of the manifestations that can grow out of it. In this one, we dig down into the data itself and relate it to the advantages that the SAFE network can have in relationship to it. And there we go. I guess that's enough to be said. I really hope you find this valuable. Let's listen. So let's welcome Gabriel and Josh to the SAFE Crossroads. Hi, guys.
Hey, John.
Hey, so well, hopefully I will have done a proper introduction in the introduction to these guys. So let's wade right in. What we're trying to do here is we're talking about socially linked data in the solid format, and that got thinking about other things. And there's a lot here about the ways we handle data that are really interesting in and of themselves, but especially as they integrate into the structure of the SAFE network and things about the SAFE network that really deal with some factors that aren't otherwise dealt with, that have to be added on to dealing with data in these ways to create a semantic web. Oh, I should mention, I recently did another podcast on technology and choice with Jonas Smedgaard, and it was about semantic web. And we deal with a lot of these factors that we're dealing with today about semantic web and ways of handling data, so that our computers can help us find the meaning that's embedded in the data, rather than, okay, there's a file here and you have to figure out whether it's applicable or not, and this, that, and the other. So I highly recommend that. I will link it in the show notes, or you can go to Technology and Choice and just kind of scan down. All right, so we've had some back talk, and it's good, as I was saying in our discussions earlier. It says, well, it's good that we did this because I didn't want to drag us off into the weeds when we were trying to record it, because there's many ways we can go here. So I think what we want to do is, who wants to step up and define for us the ground we're working on? We're talking about these different ways of dealing with data, and I think RDF, Resource Description Framework, is one of the key ones, and I think we should start there and then kind of roll through and get around to solid and then the SAFE network. Is that a pretty fair way of doing it?
Sounds good to me.
Good. So, Josh, you want to start out and tell us, keep in mind we were trying to reach the people who really don't know very much, like myself, but we also don't want to exclude really an understanding for everybody else, for the guys who really do know. So, if I have to interrupt you and say, please clarify this, don't feel offended. But
sure.
All right.
So RDF is a resource description framework. It's essentially a way that we can describe some data such that it can have meaning beyond itself. So let's say you have a JPEG of yourself. That JPEG on its own doesn't tell us anything, but we can have another document or some supporting information that says this is a picture of Josh. This picture was taken here. This picture belongs to me, and that data then helps us reuse that information. So a resource description framework helps us actually write that description. It's how we talk about, okay, so when I say person, what do I mean by that? Or when I say the word name, Do I mean the first name, someone's nickname? Do I mean their last name? That's what a resource description framework aims to solve.
Am I oversimplifying by saying it's in some ways this is just an agreed upon structure of metadata, data about the data, or is there something lacking in that?
No, I think that's pretty reasonable. It's the idea of we're going to describe this data, and how you describe it is up to you, but it's the idea that you can describe it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the framework that we're looking at for basically all of the things we're trying to talk about today, is how the different systems for describing data, and then how they interact with the data itself and with whatever network structure they're dealing with. Is that I like to feed things back and make sure I'm not like off over the cliff someplace. But does that pretty well describe the kind of the field we're playing on right now?
I think that's a fair summary, yeah.
Well, good. Boy, that was better than in all our talks previously. Well, good. Well, now we have a better way forward. So RDF, what makes RDF unique or special, or is it?
It's unique because it's an agreed upon standard. It's used quite heavily on the ClearNet for describing pages and things, so it's out there. It's got precedent, and it can be useful both for people and machine learning. If you're trying to build an AI that can understand data, you need to have some descriptions about what that is.
Cool. Does that pretty well now? Just so that's not sitting there all by itself with nothing to compare to, is there any other something that we can compare RDF to? Something that's similar or comparable but has some different aspect? Like we're going to get into solid and linked data. Is that something different, or is it the same? Or, how do we differentiate these things?
Those are essentially an extension of this idea, or built upon this idea. There may be other resource description frameworks, but none that I'm familiar with. I've basically been learning as we've learned about Solid and seen what they've been doing and how they've been doing it. Been coming back to the basics of what it's built upon, which is RDF, which sort of leads into linked data itself.
Oh, okay, good. So is there one standard for RDF?
There is not. RDF itself is the standard, and then there are many ways that you can write that. So you could, like, similar to how you've got CSV formats and XSV for spreadsheets. There are different ways to write the same information.
Okay, good. Just for CSV is comma separated. Whatever. It's where if you want to say your value. Okay, so you're going, well, let's see. I want to take my bookmarks off of one browser and put it onto another. It used to be, they've automated it a lot, but it used to be you had to download that as a file with all the data separated by commas. And if you look at it, it's like, okay, that's kind of a hash, but when you feed it back into another thing, it represents it differently. So that's CSV. And then the other one was, I don't remember what you called it, but that's for like a spreadsheet format, right?
Yeah. That's like the Excel spreadsheet or something.
Okay, good.
Maybe.
Good. I don't want to be pedantic on these things. I'm sorry that I interrupted you and lost the train. So if you could go back there.
There are many ways of writing RDF data. There are different formats that are used. Turtle is one used by Solid servers a lot. You have JavaScript specific ones. You have other ones that are better for different types of machine learning, I gather, and things. But at the core of it is still representing your data and describing your data.
Okay, good. So RDF is a really big umbrella that this is just talking about describing data. Good. Well, I understand that a lot better than I did when we talked earlier. Gabriel, what would you say is the next progression we ought to talk about? We've got linked data or web IDs. What would you go with next on that as a progression of RDF?
Yeah, probably thinking of how we do this linked data concept, right? Because RDF is, as you were saying, is just like a metadata thing or a data model for representing relationships, right? And that's actually what the linked data concept is. And RDF is what is proposed as the way to do linked data. So linked data is about just being able to connect data, information, or knowledge with links, right? With URIs. Just in the same way as when you browse the web and you have URL links, you click on them and you follow and find more information about the things you were reading, and you keep searching and following links. So
are you saying so? It's kind of like connecting the data, kind of on a hypertext level between the more granular structure. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah. But the problem with that is that works really well for humans, right? That has been working really well. But if you have computers trying to do the same, like if you want to have a search engine or something that can follow those links and make any sense of it, then you need a standard or a common ground for the computer to understand what these links are, what they mean. So if you have like a paragraph explaining about John, right? And then it says, well, if you want to see a picture of John, you can just click on this link. As a human, you just click the link and you know that you're going to find a picture of John. But the computer doesn't have that information unless it's written in a standard way that it can be identified, and using these namespaces that Josh was explaining. Like, okay, this is an image, but this is an avatar, or this is the nickname, or this is the name. This is the link of a photo of this person, that kind of thing. So that's why I think that's kind of the whole concept of linked data.
So basically, computers don't ever really bring understanding. They can't isolate the connections between things like we can. We can look and say, oh, well, that's what I'm looking for, and it's right there. Whereas a computer goes, nobody's told me what to think here.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
It needs to be able to understand the context of each relationship, and the type of relationship in
those
ways.
Those things have to be spelled out for it, so that it then says, okay, this belongs in that bin. I got it. So let me feedback here. So linked data is basically give me some way of getting an anchor on that, because it's an interesting concept, but I don't have anything that I can associate it to mentally that makes me feel like I'm holding on to something I can relate to. Can you give me an example or something there?
Probably the classic example is like if you are trying to describe you as a person, and then you want to make relationships or connections like with things about you, like people you know, or things that you like, or books that you read. Then in linked data and RDF, what they propose is to do this by having triples, right? Which is you have an object, which is a resource that you're trying to relate to something else, and then you define what is called a predicate, and that's basically another identifier to say, okay, John is the object, and then as a predicate, John knows Josh, and Josh becomes the object in this triple, right? And everything can be
that word you're using is triple?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no, I thought so, but then I just wanted to back up and make sure. So it's basically the subject, predicate, object, triple piece of data that you're talking about.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, exactly. So by using these triples, you can describe everything about every resource and connect them with relationships and some meaning in this relationship.
Okay.
So you can have triples like John knows Josh, John likes a safe network, and then each of those elements in the triple are identifiers to the different resources and predicates.
So how does that, Josh, could you give us an idea of how that would manifest in, say, experience of manipulating the data or using it from the user end? You guys are front-end guys, you're talking about user. How would I interface with that in a way that I can put a hook onto it?
So linked data could be something like, okay, I know Josh, I need his office phone number. And so you can say, okay, I have this document that's about Josh. In this document, it says job is at MaidSafe, and then there's a link to the MaidSafe data. And so you can get that MaidSafe data, and then there you can find the phone number, for example. So you've gone and taken one link to go to some other data to get a further piece of information.
So is it safe to say that data in different locations can be associated so that it can point to each other?
Exactly.
Kind of like URLs, except on a really granular level. And that's
like web pages.
Yeah, but that's accomplished by putting all of this data into a format that allows that to kind of happen more natively.
So yeah, one part of it is having these intense descriptions in the RDF data. That's largely helping machines, but being able to link to somewhere that has this data, so every piece of data having a location, every piece of data having a URL is key to the linked data, such that MaidSafe can have a URL that is the data about the company, which contains all of its information, and I, as Josh, have a URL such that when John knows Josh is pointing to this URL, which is about me, is my description in sort of RDF format.
I got it. So these are leaps that we would have to make by understanding, which can kind of be made at a much more automatic level on the computer level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So eventually you could say, I need to know everyone John knows who likes Safe, and it'll go through all your contacts and find out everyone who's posted on the Safe forum or something. Could be possible eventually.
Eventually, right. Okay, good. Well, there we've covered RDF as an umbrella of what we're talking about. Linked data as one specific idea of how that could be used. Now, solid, socially linked data is Tim Berners-Lee's project to implement this. But Gabriel, earlier you mentioned web IDs as a potential example. Is that something we want to take up before or after we dive into the aspects of solid?
Right, yeah. I think it's probably good to briefly touch on that because web IDs are basically just RDF resources, right? Web IDs is just a standard way of having a description of a person or an agent, right? Like you as a person can describe about you in a standard way, so anybody or any computer can read that data and follow again links. So a web ID is just an RDF document, really. So in that RDF document, you have these triples with links to different other resources and with specific relationships, like what you like, what's your picture, or books, as I was saying before. So a web ID is simply just an RDF document which describes a person or an agent or an organization or anything really. And the way you find that is, again, by a unique identifier, which is a URL, right, or a URI. And that's how you use that as an identifier in any other document that has a relationship with a person or with an organization or an agent, right?
What would be a practical application of that? Just to give us an idea of the range of what you're talking about, or the limits of what you're talking about.
Yeah. So in the case we've been demonstrating, working on the Safe Network using web IDs to be used as, for example, as users on the social applications. So in a similar way as you have your username and password on the ClearNet on any website like Facebook or anything, you log in with that, and then everything you do is from that user. You can use web IDs to identify yourself, right? So whenever you publish data, you can sign it and say, okay, this data that is published is being signed by this web ID.
Oh, I got it. So this gets into a security or authentication aspect too.
Right.
Now that's something that actually is pretty easy within the context of the Safe Network. Is that that would be a little different outside of the context of the safe network. Am I correct on that? Be a little more difficult.
In terms of authentication or authorization specifically, it's simpler because it's all integrated in the safe network. While in other projects like Solid, they use different protocols to use certificates and servers to publish or to have the certificates authorities, or to even publish a web ID document. But on the safe network, you just have it all integrated in the platform, right?
Yeah, well, that's a topic I really want to touch on a little more firmly here in a minute. But that seemed really relevant to this web ID thing, because otherwise that's another layer of something else that would have to be done so that you didn't have spoofing of IDs and so forth.
Yeah, just as a last comment about web IDs, which are the aspect that I really like about them, is since you have web IDs published and then you can link things from it. I can share with you my web ID URL, and then you can find in that location all the information you need to communicate with me in any way. If you want to send me an email, you want to find my picture, or if you want to send me some cryptocurrency, you're going to find wallet addresses there.
Oh.
Everything can be found from there. So once you have a web ID, it depends how you decide to
how you present the web ID. You could have multiple ones for different applications. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, the different identities, right?
Right.
And then in each of them, you expose a different type of information that people can use, like to send you an email or to find what are the people that like in a social app, or different posts or messages that you've been receiving from people, also in a social application like Pattern, the one that we use to demonstrate these use cases. So all those sorts of things, those are the aspects that I really like about the web IDs.
Cool. Well, thanks. That really is helpful. So let's slide on to Solid. What I guess, Josh, maybe you can lead on this. We've got RDF as an umbrella, linked data as a concept of linking data. What is Solid, and how is it a progression?
So Solid is this idea of using RDF and linked data to be able to enable social linked data. Essentially, as Gabriel was just describing, with using web IDs, you can find people and you can log on to applications and have your data. Solid does this on the ClearNet. It's a set of standards for servers and saving your data, which enables you to choose where you want to store your data using personal online data storage, like a pod they call it, where you can choose to save your data. And then you can access that data from any application. So you save your data, you save your list of friends, you save your contact, or you have your inbox email data, but it's your data. And then you can choose which application you want to access it. And that's one of the cool concepts that really bleeds into what's possible and safe.
Yeah, well, let's not jump to safe yet. I want to look at the existing scene in relationship to that, and how that, I know that Sir Tim Berners-Lee originated this because he saw a real crisis in the lack of data ownership. So you get silos like Facebook that they're really interesting places to meet, but when you step into them and share things, you are owned. Your data is owned by the platform itself. That makes it like, say, well, I'm tired of Facebook. I'm going to move over to Gab or some other platform, and that transition isn't easy because all of the data and effort you've put into is siloed in Facebook. How does Solid propose to alleviate that?
So by enabling you to store and own your data, essentially, instead of being tethered to Facebook because all your friends are on it or whatever, the application just is a UI for accessing your data. So all of a sudden, if you don't like how Facebook is performing or their UI or whatever, you can choose to use something else. And because it's your data stored where you control it, you can do that. And you just go and you log into this new app with your web ID, and it says, my data is over here. Here are the authentication things you need. And the new app can just go and get your data. And that data, again, because it's written in with RDF and it's linked, the new application, even if it's not written in exactly the same way, will be able to understand the data and leverage it.
Wow. So you wouldn't lose your connections and everything if everybody was doing that. Well, that's kind of cool. I just had that thought. We talked back to, your contact list or your bookmark settings in one browser. You're going to say, well, I'm going to switch from Firefox to Brave or from Brave to Opera or whatever. Basically, you can take that data and put it in a format that exports and then goes, and you own it. And so imagine that with all of your contacts and all of your communications and so forth, and just go to a different application that helps you manipulate it in a more personally satisfying way. Does that sum it up, at least as one example?
That's definitely one of the key aspects of Solid, yeah.
And then we talk here about the pods, the personal online data storage? Is that or whatever? Well, whatever it is, it's basically where you control your data. Now, you could do that on a home server, but there's no reason why you couldn't put it in the cloud someplace, right? Or you say, well, I'm going to rent space one place or another, and that's where you point all your data to, and you could move that at any time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of neat, because then people have control of their data, and they say, well, I have it on, this setup of servers, or I pay a certain amount a year and it's always hosted, and if I don't like them, I can move it. So that gives people real ownership of their data.
Yeah, like if you think of any application, like what they are basically some database to storing the data it generates or the data it manages, and and separate you have the actual UI or the interface the application exposes, right? So if you now take that database and you really separate it from the provider of the UI, you basically have a pod, right? That's where the data for the application lives, but then you can read that data with any UI as long as that data is in a standard format, right?
Right.
So that's kind of the idea, splitting up the data from the application itself.
Cool. So this is socially linked data. It's basically just the same thing with a specific application for social interaction. Is that accurate, or is there some other aspect of this I don't grasp?
Yes, like a social application is just an example, right? Any application that is storing data, like if you have a Google Docs, all your documents there, they are stored in a format that only the Google Docs application understand. But if that's stored in a different way, in a standard way, with an RDF and with a standard APIs that any other application can read and write, then you can use Google Docs app, or you can use John's Doc app, right?
Right. No, I understand that. I guess my question that falls under just kind of the general thing of RDF in general and linked data. But I'm talking specifically about Solid. Is there something about Solid that would make some variation of what we are used to at Google Docs particularly different than, say, just linked data?
I wouldn't.
Well, I guess we've talked about the umbrella, and we've talked about linked data, and I was going on to Solid as a particular project, and I don't know if that's unique or if it's I don't know. Do you see what I'm asking?
I think the same things could be achieved with RDF and linked data. I don't think there's anything specific in the Solid setup that offers any advantage to anyone else over anything else that might be using RDF or linked data. It's just a set of standards on the ClearNet that allows you to do this, and it has the authorization on the ClearNet sorted out for you to do this with web IDs and the certificates and things, as Gab touched on earlier.
I got it. Also, then there's also the factor of it's an existing project that has some credibility because of who's behind it and who's working on it, and so there'll be a certain amount of network effect due to that in applying those standards. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say so, yes. Yeah.
So that's probably one good reason to kind of adhere at least largely to those standards and adopting it for the safe network. And that bridges us over to all of this stuff connected to the safe network. Let's talk about why the safe network is a really useful in dealing with all this. What about the safe network makes dealing with resource description framework or solid or whatever variation of this especially appealing?
The setup of safe really lends itself to this sort of, well, any data storage really, because it's decentralized and it's backed up, and you're not having to trust one single party, your pod that you've rented somewhere, or you don't have to set up your own server. So that's one part that sort of takes away one niggle, perhaps, of Solid. And then the other major thing is that the authentication is baked into the network setup. So you own your data. As soon as you log in, you are set up to be accessing your data. Switching web IDs is incredibly easy. It's just nominating a new one to be using for a given web page, and there's no hassle with a need for setting up a certificate or authorizing against a specific server, and the setup, which are all things which not necessarily issues, but they're definitely not the easiest thing in the world on Solid. I'm not saying it is the easiest thing in the world on Safe, but it's pretty easy.
I think the main thing that I see is that, all of that fundamental dealing with data and the security of data is by the design of the safe network, well, private, secure, and free by default. And it's stored and maintained, so you don't have to maintain a pod. You store your data on the network, and it's there. You don't necessarily know where in the physical world it exists because it's moving around even, but but it's dealt with, and the security of the data is dealt with, as it's kind of like everybody's using the same system, but nobody can tell anything about what's going on except that the data is there and is manipulated securely. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. And as you say, the security of the pods thing, if you're renting it, if it's on Amazon or wherever, you're relying on this third party, and you're relying on this third party not being hacked.
Right, or not being malicious itself, or exactly. Well, that in itself is a big deal. Is that the key? The fact that it's storing your data securely and is your access to it is ensured when you actually only have one logon necessary to the network, which you can do securely, and then basically you then have access. You can switch web IDs within that original login relationship too, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's you can set up as many web IDs you want. It's another piece of data that you own, and with those web IDs, you can be, you can set up your own encryption keys and be as anonymous as you want, really, within that setup.
Okay, good. There are two angles I want to touch on there. One is Solid. We have one particular member of the community that's really working on safe and solid integration. But I'm seeing that it's not one or the other, is it? I mean, we don't have to go, well, it's solid is how we're going to deal with it or not. It's a matter of the resource description frameworks can be multiple. Is that true? We're just trying to accommodate the access to it using the solid protocol as a kind of priority, because everybody who sees the value of solid is also going to see, hey, well, this is a good way to utilize it. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think that's one of the main goals of the Solid project. What they are trying to do is help users and developers to use this bunch of standards, but allow you to store data wherever you want, as long as it's using these standards. So safe is one option, but if in the future or even now, maybe there are other projects that provide or expose APIs or interfaces which are complying with these standards, those are also options for storing your data and publishing your web IDs or your pods and everything, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. So it's kind of a nice relationship because there's a synergy in working together on it. But also the Safe Network could go ahead and design its own RDF standards, but then that would kind of become a silo on the Safe Network. Not that Safe would own it, but that there wouldn't be as much interactivity. So that's still doable, right? You can use this in many different ways. Is that so? I guess what the core and front end teams with MaidSafe are doing, and if I'm wrong, correct me, but they're focusing around this whole thing in Solid to increase the reach of socially linked data. But to incorporate it and make it easy to use within the safe environment.
Yeah, exactly. I think probably Josh can comment more on that because he's been already actively working on some ideas for making it easy to use. I'm going to just comment that yes, like at the backend, have been started to get involved in, like providing like lower level APIs for manipulating RDF. So at the moment, we've been trying to expose this as a proof of concept in the Node or the JavaScript APIs, but now they are trying to find ways to provide lower layers. So other programming languages can make use of the same utilities, right? To manipulate RDF, to manipulate web IDs. Josh, I don't know if you want to comment more on utilities and the ideas that you've been researching.
Yeah. So we totally don't want to reinvent the RDF wheel or anything. I think really from when we've seen Solid and what it's been trying to do is in terms of like data ownership and stuff, we sort of realized that that's totally what we're all about at Safe. And we've been looking at, okay, so how can we take these things that they're using, RDF and linked data, and apply them on the Safe network? In the end, RDF data is just more data. So using that and setting up linked data on the network has been our primary goal, which we're sort of enabling with a new way to represent data objects on the network in a single link, which previously wasn't possible. So that sort of opens up linked data as a whole for the Safe network. And then with that, a lot of what Solid has been trying to do is already now possible. So while we're not necessarily trying to replicate the whole Solid stack, we want to make RDF data and all of this work on Safe such that should anyone want to make their pod store data on the Safe network, that would be possible. Because in the end, you're just writing RDF data to the network, and you can retrieve it from the network, and you could serve that through the Solid server, however you want.
Well, that's cool. Well, this has really been a good wrap-up. There's only one other thing that I want to address is you guys have been doing work there. Tell us about Patter. Patter is, and anything else related to that. Patter is kind of a social network program that you've got running now on the Alpha network. Tell us about that, how it's been going, and anything else related to the actual implementation of these things that's going on in real time.
So Patter is essentially us taking the idea of web IDs and enabling you to use them to effectively log in to a website. And with that website interface then takes web ID and accesses the inbox of that ID. So you can say, this is where my data would live, my inbox data. the email, or actually I think it's posts on Pata. But the important thing is that the website can then take that and say, like, okay, so you're writing a message, and when you save it, it posts it to that web ID. So it saves it to the data for you. And with that, you have this whole, portable data situation. You can see what's on your wall. You can see that someone wrote it, and you can click on that, and you can go and see their wall. It's like Facebook 101, essentially, but decentralized using RDF data that is not tied to a specific application. So while Pata exists, someone created not Pata, which is essentially a similar website with a different colored UI that enables you to access all of your data. So this is essentially what the idea behind Solid is as well, is this...
The portability of the data itself, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Pata was really just a proof of concept to get that going, but it really works as a social network. There is a tiny, definitely tiny, but there is a social network on Safe where you can do this with your data. And should someone else make a better UI, which I would love to see, if anyone wanted to come along and make the social network better, or take the Pata and change it entirely and post it somewhere else, all of your data can still be used over there, which is, I think, rad.
Yeah, that's neat. I'm glad you mentioned not Patter, because it's kind of like I'm tired of this platform. I'm going to go over here, but all your data comes with you, so you don't lose any of the connections or anything. So that is really cool. What would you guys recommend for any developer type or anybody else to get involved and find out about this?
I would say to take a look at Pata and see how that's interacting with Safe in general, to see how working with web IDs goes and that things, if you're looking Safe specific. For RDF stuff in general, they should start with the standards and sort of go from there. There's a lot of reading. It's one of the main issues I think exists around RDF is is it comprehensible? It's not easily comprehensible, and it's not easy to work with for web developers specifically. So there's a lot of understanding. There's a lot of mistakes that we've made when we've been building Pata, for example, and web IDs, and trying to figure out how all of this needs to be represented to the standards. So that's also something that I've been looking at with RDF data and ideas for how we might improve our JavaScript APIs for web developers to be able to work with RDF data more easily. Because in the end, what we want is people to make data and to do it using RDF, but we don't want them to not do that because they didn't want to spend a week reading about it, which
right
might be necessary.
Well, so we're on a real frontier here, not just for the Safe Network either, but about this whole exploitation of semantic representations of data that open up vast, even on the ClearNet, even on other platforms using IPFS or the DAT Beaker browser protocols. All of these things this is relevant in all those directions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
It's a broad problem that many people are trying to solve. It's not just us or Solid, really.
Well, good. Well, thank you all for helping us understand. Now, I definitely have a much better understanding than I did even before we started to record this. And I'm really pleased with that, because it's really a big deal, regardless of the fact that you guys and that we're all particularly interested in the Safe Network. But I think it does highlight, we've also highlighted some reasons for people to look into Safe. So to do that, I can tell you, if you're not already a participant in the community, go to safenetforum.org and bop around there. It doesn't take long. You have to do a little reading, get up to trust level 1. Then you can request a ticket to access the AlphaNet. That's not going to be that way forever once it goes live, but for right now, for security reasons, you just got to do a little something to read some posts and so forth, like some things, and you can participate. You can go on and get the experience and see Patter in action. As simple as it is, it's there, and it's actually what's going on under the hood is pretty cool. You can even join Notpatter just to prove that your data ports over some other direction. So anything we ought to cover before we wrap up, guys?
As always, and as you were saying, just encourage developers to join and play around with the things we've been doing. Like we have the dev development forum, which is becoming more and more active, and I think it's a lot of fun with really technical discussions for developers. So just encourage developers to not be shy.
Okay.
They can see now that we are just real people.
Well, good. I definitely find that to be true. Well, fellas, thanks so much, and we look forward to getting back in the future and checking out your progress.
Thank you very much
for having us, John.
That's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Hey, folks, we were wrapping up and congratulating ourselves, and what a good job we did. Realize we missed something, actually, that Gabriel brought up. So, Gabriel, tell us about this concept of DNS on the Safe network using the linked data.
Yeah, I just, based on what Josh was just saying about the benefits of using the Safe network for, linked data and the semantic web. If you think of linked data, they are based on URLs, and on the ClearNet, if you want to have a domain name, you have to register, and then you have to find a server to publish the data under that domain. But that still has several issues, as we know, right? Like that can be,
can be shut down, or it costs you,
exactly,
and
right? While on the Safe network, when you create your public name, which is, the same type of thing as the DNS domain names, you have a public name URL that's effectively yours, and nobody can change or hack or take it down, right? Unless the whole network goes down. So you effectively own that domain or public name, as it's called, and it's going to be there always, right? As long as you own it, and you can publish data under the same. So that URL will be available or will be owned by you always, as long as you really want to own it. If you want to transfer it, then maybe. But you don't have to, take the risk of the DNS being attacked or hacked or anything like that, right?
That brings up a whole lot of questions. I watched the little video that you guys on your team well, I guess you narrated it, and as a non-technical person, I got quite lost in the details. But I have questions about that. I think we may want to do a separate episode about DNS on the Safe network. Are we up for that in the future?
Yeah, I'll be up. Well, yeah, it's
good.
A whole topic in itself.
Yeah, so, but since we've mentioned it for a developer, I think this is more applicable to developers whose ears go up on DNS, decentralized. That might be important. Where would we direct them for information on that?
I think in the forums we have a couple of posts explaining these type of things, including some recent proposals from Josh, actually, for making some improvements, specifically about storing the DNS data in RDF. So,
no, didn't you guys publish, or somebody publish a request for comment on GitHub too?
Yeah, that's up. As of a month maybe. So in the MaidSafe RFC repo, there's one for the public name system, and there'll be another one coming soon for how we manage public names in terms of RDF data as well.
Good. Well, that covers the what was like, and thanks a lot.